S&P rallies ahead of CPI release. Nasdaq holds a critical level. SOX continues to consolidate but closes over 500. Bitcoin continues to build a massive flag. SMCI makes all-time highs. Carvana rejects a key level. MicroStrategy, Mara, Riot all close at new highs on the year. All this and what to look for tomorrow with CPI. We have a lot to go over. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome back. First and foremost, I was pretty impressed with today's action. If we just take a look at our moving averages, 22 test the other day, flipped, got over the 12. Higher high today, which was pretty impressive considering all things. You would think that today would have been a quiet day, maybe came back down, tested that key level again, and then pushed off. We didn't even do that. We just rallied. Got back to the same exact level we were at the other day, and you can see it right where we reversed on Friday. And we hit it again and we stopped. We're gonna have to watch that 44.75 tomorrow. Now, obviously the volatility of CPI is just gonna bulldoze that one way or another, but that is a critical level and one we should be watching tomorrow. For those that watch the pre-markets and see how all these videos are linked together, you can start seeing what's happening in here. If I use the cloud formation, which I use a lot, you start seeing how the purple cloud is giving a short-term buy signal. And this is really important ahead of this. And I'm really surprised that it's doing it, but nonetheless, it's doing it. Here you're starting to see us turn green. And as that turns green, that starts becoming a long-term buy signal. The last one lasted about 2 weeks. And I use them and it gives me a pretty good guide. So I'm surprised to see this ahead of the number. And it really shows me exactly what I thought today, that we're not really seeing a lot of fear of this number. For example, if we take a look at the Nasdaq, see something similar, but let's click off this cloud for a second and take a look and dive in. Now you can see that we couldn't get back to the same exact area we were at before, where the S&P did get back to that area. I think that's an important distinction that we should pay attention to. We're not really seeing that, but I'll show you where we are seeing those higher highs happen, because we're not seeing them on the Nasdaq now. You're still being walked down. No matter how you look at that, we're still being walked down. You can see that from this level here. And if you just draw a diagonal line straight down, I mean, it's hard to miss, isn't that? So you still have that DTL just sitting right there. So you want to watch that. You're watching this volume pick up. The volume is getting pretty excessive, in my opinion, all day long ahead of a key level. I mean, when you start looking at the volume down here, for me, it wasn't like this. And all of a sudden, people at 3 o'clock are buying the Nasdaq futures. That's not people that are afraid of CPI. They're positioning themselves for CPI. That's what you do at the end of the day in the last hour. And we can see how they're positioning themselves. Drill into this on a daily, clean that off. Now, there's a couple things here I'm not really crazy about. I'm not crazy about the lower low here on the RSI versus where we're at up here. That doesn't make me feel great. Now, RSI, everybody uses it differently. Some people say it's a lagging indicator. It's a leading indicator. For me, the way that I utilize it is as a leading indicator. I use it primarily for divergences and then certain lines in the sand. But I'm going to wind up doing a video on it based upon the comments that I got. I'm going to redo. I did one video, but I'm going to do another one on it. But you're boxing yourself in here, and we can see this. Right? It is setting up to do something, and I know that's not that prophetic. And you take out these lines, and then you go, okay, well, what exactly are we doing? And you can see that we held that 22, not once, but twice. Now we're sitting right in there, and we're setting up. That's exactly what we want to say. Exactly what we want to say. And that's exactly where we want to go with this. We don't need this to just explode. Consolidating for a month or two would be very nice and just work off the overbought. Now, for tomorrow, the levels that I would worry about would be along the lines of that DTL for one. Let's just draw this here a little bit better. Zoom down here. I'd be worried about this level right here. I'm watching it get through that 15.4. We did clear 15.2 today. I think that's very good. My concern for tomorrow would be if the Nasdaq tends to break down here and we start making lower lows, 14.8, something like that. That would be a concern. Obviously, we have some resistance or support rather at that 15 level, but I can just draw that straight across and you can see it pretty clear. But I still don't know if that's going to be enough to hold if it's a bad number. Now, we never know how this number is going to go. We see CPI coming out and we see them saying, oh, it's going to be, okay, it's going to be better than expected. JP Morgan and Goldman are really out pounding the table on this, that it's going to be a lot better than expected. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe that's why we saw what it is. You have to understand that these numbers, they're highly contested in how they're calculated. It's there's a lot of room for error on these, and there's a lot of room for them to go back and recount differently. You never really know what you're going to get. If you took a look at crude oil during the same period of time, and we say, okay, let's go take a look at crude oil for June. And I use this to get a kind of back of envelope way of looking at, are energy prices going to be a concern? And I just go to the first, which puts me right here, and you drill out on this and just go, okay, well, this is where we were June 1st, this is where we are June 30th. Well, prices are up. Now, why is that important? Because if I go to May 1st and I look here, prices were down. April, prices were down. And I'll mark that off as well. This is a really back of the envelope way to do it, but crude oil was down. May, crude oil was down. June, crude oil is going to be up to flat. That's very different. If we looked at gasoline, we'll see the same exact thing. That is not going to be the driving force on why we drop. Now, a lot of people are talking about Manheim, and that Manheim prices are down, and that could be the driving force because that was really the driving force on the way up. You never know how all this is interconnected and how it's going to play out. I use crude oil as a back of the envelope. If crude oil is up a lot, then usually you could see a surprise to the upside. It just balances itself out that way. But with what we're seeing in the car market and what you're seeing with Carvana, I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. What's interesting to me about this car trade, and I say it, I like it, it's one of the names we do play around with in the community. It doesn't seem to matter what the news is that's coming out. And that's good, that's bad, but you're seeing the volume pick up here. You formed this pattern and then you broke out and you're coming into earnings. This is all great, but the issue that I see with it is if Manheim auto prices are dropping and CPI is tomorrow, well, how is that going to play out? How are we going to deal with CPI tomorrow? I mean, everybody's aware of what those numbers are. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in drilling into them. The bottom line is, you know your estimates. We'll go over them live, pre-market, live when they come out, and we'll see if there's live trades to be taken. But where am I going with this? Well, if used auto prices are down tomorrow, how is CVNA going to stay up? How is AutoNation? How do these stocks stay up? And I want to be clear about this. It's not just CVNA, it's AutoNation. They have CarMax. Okay, they don't seem to really be understanding that they're supposed to be in a bull market where AutoNation obviously gets it. Here we are, and you have earnings coming out Friday the 21st. They look excellent. They look absolutely excellent, and there's very little to do or to say here. It's definitely something that I would be paying attention to, and I'm very curious how that comes out when they break, because they will break it out line by line. Because if I look at CVNA, I would have thought the fact that it was already reported last night on how loans are dropping off, that this would have come down today, and it didn't. What it did was pulled back, and we saw this a lot today, and you saw this pullback, you rally, and then the pullback, and then the reversal. We had tons of reversals today off these lows, tons of them. And that tells you have net buyers. That tells you people are just looking for supply or just stop hunting. That's all they did to people today was stop hunt them and then rip them. They did it in all kinds of names. It didn't matter. It truly did not matter what the name was. You can even see here today, MicroStrategy's up 410. Everybody's cheering. Within 5 minutes, they're looking at 398. Then you get washed out. They undercut you here. You think it's over, and then they rip it and they close at highs. And we're seeing that everywhere. It's definitely something to pay attention to. It didn't matter the name. They did it across the board. Riot, Mara, Rivian, they knocked that all the way down, only to rally it. Still closed down on the day, but you understand where I'm going with this. You take a look at UPST. They open. So they rally it. Looks like it's going to go 41, and then all of a sudden we go sideways, and then that's it. It just rips. And once you got your big long green bar here, that was pretty much the end of it. Now you have your trade on and you just leave it alone. And it did absolutely excellent today, ripped up and then just kept pushing. You can see up here where you finally started to crack. And it's not rocket science, but you can see that level in there and you can see how it's acting. That little crack over that 9 EMA, as soon as that happened, that was it. I kind of use that as a demarcation line when I'm doing short-term intraday trading. Rivian, same thing. You can just see rips up and then boom, as soon as it breaks there, that was pretty much it on that day. But we'll see how this plays out. Overall, I like Rivian. I like the way it's setting up here. And essentially what we should really be focused on is what's going to be our driver. Now, the SOX is setting up to be that driver, and I like that. But we're also seeing Bitcoin continue to push. We're seeing that absolutely hold in here. It's definitely something, again, that we're going to want to watch, and we want to see how this plays out. But that number is going to be absolutely vicious tomorrow at 8:30, and it's going to set the tone. What gets me looking at this market is that we're in a position here where we didn't pull back. People bought ahead of CPI. They have a bet, and they made a bet. And I think that's a very important distinction. And you're starting to see rotation. SMCI today hit all-time highs. The fact that it backed off ahead of CPI is nothing, and it gained 10 points after it took out a low. I mean, this is not something that's falling out of bed. All it did was just wash people out, undercut once again. Let's take out that low, let's undercut, let's flush. And then what do? Pop over, and then it just runs into the end of the day. And then you can see the buying at the end of the day. People are buying speculative names ahead of CPI. It's kind of an interesting time to see this. NVIDIA is having a real tough time at that 427 level. You just might want to mark that off. I don't know what's going on up here, but here I'll draw it straight across, and you can just see every time you get over that level, you just start seeing selling. And I'm not really sure what the issue is or who the seller is, but obviously you have a seller up there. So that's something to be aware of. I would be focused on the Bitcoin names tomorrow. They look the best to me. They hardly pulled back today, and you're just seeing them constantly push higher. Now, the other sector that's really starting to move are these oil service names, and that does not bode well for CPI. Just FYI, going forward, if oil starts going up, it means things get more expensive. Start looking at this SLB. I mean, this was absolutely perfect today. Came across, you get your little hesitation there, you can use that, and then it just flips and goes. And that was it, pushed all day long. And that wasn't the only one. You had Hal that did it, Halliburton. You could see that one absolutely ripped as well. And then we even had the little ones like Rig, and they continued to push. We are seeing other sectors move. And if you take a look at this, even financials, look at financials. Look at how they moved. Well, they're not moving like we're going to keep raising interest rates. They're moving as if we're not going to keep raising interest rates. Let's watch how we get at that 3481 and go from there. KRE, if we take a look at this, the way we're starting to turn, same exact thing. So overall, we have different areas of the market that are starting to participate. Here's XLE flipping, making that higher high for the first time. And let's take a look at IWM, the small caps. Well, we're back to 190. We're back to 190 on IWM. Now, if it was not CPI tomorrow, I would have been all over this trade overnight. But with CPI tomorrow, you just never know what's going to happen. And this is a classic example of that. This looks like it's about ready to rip and finally push and head back to these levels. Now, CPI is going to set the tone for that. Now, this is Fed Watch tool. Everybody should be familiar with this. It just shows you exactly on this date what the probability of a hike is. And right here you can see 92.4, which is pretty high. I just think it's interesting that it's starting to drop. That's all. That's why I'm showing this. It's not a huge drop, but it's a drop. I do think that they're going to have no choice but to raise rates unless CPI is bad, like really, really deflationary, which I don't believe that we're going to see. And then also you have PPI on Thursday. The real estate sector is starting to break out. You can start seeing the higher high here. This is another sector that's turning. We are finding footing in other areas. We're seeing energy continue to push, break out of that DTL for the first time. We're seeing financials, they're pushing. We're getting breath. We're expanding out on what's working. It's not just big tech. Big tech's actually coming in. Okay, you can see that with Tesla, we hardly went anywhere today. NVIDIA really hardly went anywhere today. But at the same time, the SOX is up. You're seeing the breadth increase, and that's exactly what you want to see in a market like this. That's it.